what is called sovereign capital. And this sovereign capital must start with us recognizing that we are a young continent. We are a young continent with over 60% of the population youthful. And you may wonder why I'm saying this, but let's put things in perspective. Across the entire African continent today, and that's why I said this is a soul-searching discussion here today, across the entire continent, most countries won their self-determined role in the early 60s and 70s. But astonishingly, while in the 1970s, Africa accounted for over just 3% of global manufacturing output, over time, this share has continuously shrink to a point that, as we're speaking here today, the continent is constrained when it comes to added value enterprises, adding value to what it produces. It imports unemployment and export employment. There is absolutely no reason for that in 2022 for us to be talking about this aspect. Manufacturing is the basis upon which every economy that has developed is actually built on. But for the case of Africa, it's shrunk by 50% since the 70s. This scenario, as we speak today, plays out in health. It plays out in energy. It plays out in energy where the continent is actually accounting for less than 1% of global solar installed capacity, yet we have 365 days of sunshine. We have 620 million Africans who don't have energy. Today, they're energy impoverished, no access to electricity, yet the continent boasts of the biggest solar power capacity on earth. This is paradoxical. And so this discussion here today is, yes, it is a conference to ensure that at least we strengthen biosecurity and seize opportunities to tap into the biosafety method, but at the same time, you can only go to war with the army you have, and Africa's army is high young people, and that's why I'm putting this perspective. So when you look at the continent today, Africa produces 1 billion tons of raw materials, worth $406 billion US, which underpins some of the most lucrative industries in the entire world. Smartphone industries, the minerals come from this continent. Solar energy industry that is worth $190 billion US a year. The minerals come from this this continent. Aircraft manufacturing industry that is worth $400 billion US. Among others, Africa producing these inputs get missing when it comes to value-added products. The continent imports up to 95% of all medicines that it uses. And this is a big market for the continent. It's a big market opportunity. But Africa has about 375 drug manufacturers for about 1.4 billion citizens. Yet, in comparison, India, a country whose population is equivalent to Africa's population, has up to 10,500 manufacturers. Isn't that paradoxical? Yet, at the same time, Africa spends $16 billion US importing pharmaceuticals, a significant missed opportunity for enterprise opportunities to tap, especially now that we have the Africa Continental Free Trade, which is worth $3.4 trillion US that can actually be tapped into. Why have I laid this down? I've laid this down for a reason, to show the missing link that has costed Africa opportunities. The missing link that has costed Africa opportunities is the failure to make human capital the engine of development, the engine center of our development. Because we know that while human capital, which is people's skills, people's abilities, people's passions, people's aptitude, the fundamental of human capital, the skills, the talents, the energy, the passion, the aptitude they represent is value up to 15 times the value of natural capital and 4 times the value of produced capital. So why on earth do we then prioritize minerals more than human skills? That's where the failure starts. And that's why I'm here today, to try to debunk this, to put meaning, so that at least we can be able to understand the reality of where we felt and where we sleep, so that at least we cannot be able to make those mistakes moving forward. As we speak today, Africa is known more for the quality of her tea. Africa is known more for the quality of her cocoa. Africa is known more for the quality of the beauty of her landscape, of the beaches, the wildlife, the glitter of her gold and diamonds, than for her talents. We're not known for our talents. Africans are very talented people. We're skillful, passionate, and energetic, creative, resilient people that have proven over time against selflessness of the people we know. But we are not known for this. The quality of an African remains undefined. We are not proud of who we are to the extent that we are supposed to be. And that's where we get missing at. We are known for the wildlife, for the wonderful sceneries and glamour. Yes, but do we project our skills? Do we project our aptitudes, our creativity? The answer is not optimal. And that's why we are having this conversation here today. The quality of an African remains undefined up to today, yet this is the most sovereign capital that we have. And this has been the biggest missed opportunity for the continent. So as the generation, the current generation today, we must turn the page. And so this conversation here today, I call it a conversation. It's not a lecture, it's a conversation. It's for each and every one of us to ask this very simple question. How can I play a part in ensuring that we turn challenges into opportunities without complaining? Because we complain and the problems do not change. The problem remains the same today, tomorrow, next year. And so we need to start becoming solutions providers in the process. As we're speaking today, let's face it, at no time have the conversation like it has been in this conference with a very timely team that unleashes the opportunities that sometimes are hidden in biosecurity and biosafety. At no time has this conversation been more important, not only because the past 2 years have taught us lessons under the cyclone of COVID-19 pandemic that reshaped lives of millions of people, caused pain, but yet we have the Ukraine-Russian war that people are feeling it in the kitchen tables. At the same time, we have the elephant in the room, which is climate change. That is redefining the contours of this continent more dramatically than any other. Droughts in the Horn of Africa. 30 million people, as we speak today, suffering, going to bed without food, with their stomach aching of hunger. Floods, which we've seen Kogi State across over 33 states in Nigeria and other countries in the continent today. These are not abstraction nor theater. These are realities. So we are faced with these calamities and challenges today. And the big question is, which amount of money can be able to solve this if we do not leverage also on our skills and talents? No matter how much you have, if you don't have the skills that can be able to turn a challenge into an opportunity, the money will finish and the problems will remain. That's a fact. We're not told those realities sometimes. But I'm here today to tell you these realities because as we're speaking now, climate change actually is costing the productivity of each and every African by up to 15% every year. And right here in Nigeria, climate change costs the country up to 100 billion in lost economic opportunities each and every year, which is projected to be 4 times more in the next 27 years from today. Across the continent, humanity and our shared environment face 3 planetary crises that I did allude to on Monday. What we're facing here today, climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution caused by unsustainable consumption and production are challenges that are significantly impacting the entire African region and the world. And these impacts are sweeping across everyone, touching and causing pain, regardless of whether you are young or you are old. The pain caused is felt across the board. For example, if you take Nigeria here today, generating an estimated 500,000 tons of plastic waste each and every year, which further degrades the environment. Lagos, where we are in today, generates every day over 2,000 tons of daily plastic. This morning I was opportune to actually visit the waste exchange that is run by young people in Lagos here. The waste recycling initiative, showcasing that waste is wealth, that you waste opportunities if you are not tapping into that world. But yet, sometimes when we see these challenges, we faint under them rather than looking at the opportunities that can be tapped from them. These plastic bottles, what they are showcasing is that they are not ending up in landfills. They're turning them into plastic tires. They're creating jobs for young people. They're creating jobs for our mothers. And I saw our amazing mothers there. We actually sang a very nice song. Plastics, they constitute worlds and opportunities. But sometimes we don't tell our story, and I don't know why we are afraid to tell our stories. If you do not tell your story, it will be told to you in the way that befits the person who tells it. And that's what we're missing at. And that's why I structured this discussion here today. In the face of emergencies, our resilience must go beyond what we know. Our resilience must go beyond the talk that we're told, because there is profound power in a narrative. If you cannot control your narrative, you will be controlled. That's a fact. It's not a fallacy. It's the truth. And that's why I'm telling you here today, because I understand something about it. This African proverb reminds us, as we speak today, that in time of crisis, the wise build bridges. The wise build bridges. And this is a stark reminder that wise people never remain passive in their mistakes. That amidst the calamities and challenges that we're facing as a people, as a continent, as citizens, we cannot be able to remain passive in our mistakes, but apply ourselves to the solutions that bridge the transition from crisis to success by dedicating ourselves to start to see opportunities in challenges. That every challenge is a disguised opportunity, but it can only be an opportunity when we are prepared for it. Opportunities meet those who are prepared, and that is why sometimes we say people are lucky. Yes, because they were prepared. Of course, we have undeserved grace, but if you're not prepared, you will still miss the opportunity. You will still miss the opportunity. And therefore, we must be able to leverage this ability and be the solution providers, because the base ladder starts with us to ascend to that place where we must be. So today, everyone here, regardless, and those who are listening online, regardless of whether you're young or you're old, there is nothing like young, there's nothing like old. What matters is progress. An idea that a young person comes up with will solve a community problem and benefit the young and old. An idea that someone who is old comes up with will solve the problems of the community and benefit the young. So each and every one of us is important in this solutions process. Each and every one of us is important because we are living in a moment, what I call the defining moment, where everybody's decision can make or break and can define the kind of African destiny that we can be able to create for our own selves. So I stand here today before you as a son of this country, of course, as a global citizen, to say that each and every one of us must be called to wisdom. To say that we need no special invitation to be called to the solutions table. To say that we need no special prioritization or consideration to become a solution provider. And that each and every one of us must report for duty. As we live here today, in whatever profession we are in, we must start to leverage that profession to inspire one another, because inspiration is very important, but sometimes we miss to understand that it's a project that we must be part and parcel of. That young person in that community that have lost everything, that has never gone to school, that have no connections to those at the top, gets disenfranchised. But just telling that young person that he or she can make it and starting to guide, regardless of tribe or which country you come from, and inspire our young people can drive a transformational narrative that we've never seen, and inspire people to start doing what has never been done. When we start to say that they cannot do it, we are destroying value. We are destroying our sovereign capital. When we start to use narratives that we are too poor. Yes, I came from a poor, I get something about poverty. I grew up in a poor home. But poverty is not an indictment. Neither is it a permanent condition for anybody. So our narrative matters. And for us to be able to address this, we need one word: reimagination. So we must reimagine our thinking. And so I'm going to leave you with 5 aspects as I round up with this conversation. Why do we need a reimagination? We need a reimagination of solutions because that is what is required of you and me, to see things through a solutions lens, not through a complaining lens. To see things through a solutions lens, not through a blame game lens. To see things through the perspective of enterprising, that we can see our ways and see that it is world. And that we can protect our environment, understanding that our environment protected help us to be healthy. That our environment protected help put food on the table, because when you plant, even if you apply that fertilizer, without water, how will the crops grow? And when there is a drought, without water, how will you be able to even survive? Your cattle and livestock will not be able to do so. And that we need to start to think in a synergistic and systems way, not in silos, because the reality is that biosafety and biosecurity, the One Health thinking through a systemic way is what we need today. But that thinking must start from within. That I alone cannot do it, because we constitute the part of the solution. The sum total of our collective efforts will make progress. But individually, we will make progress, but not enough. And so we need each and everyone, regardless of where we come from and regardless of how we look, regardless of our accent. I am proud of my accent. Yes, it's my unique ability. And I hear some Africans tell, oh, how you get this kind of accent now? Now, which part you come out? I'm proud of it. We must be proud of who we are. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the first aspect to reimagine is our food systems. I have never understood this. We are in a continent with one of the best indigenous knowledge and crops and different attributes that we don't feel proud to project. I've never understood. We must reimagine our food systems. We live in a continent with what I call a golden crop. Cassava is Africa's gold. It can survive during drought and during floods. The Russian-Ukraine war saw the continent inflation increase by 12.2%, yet food prices skyrocketed to 50%. I have not heard a discussion across the continent on how we can leverage cassava to replace wheat. Yet it is a climate-resilient crop that can grow during droughts and floods. What is wrong with us? Now, who bewitch we now? What is wrong with us? It is consumed by over 500 million people across the continent. Cassava is consumed by and has a market value of over 23.5 billion US dollars. It is a crop that under the changing temperature, wheat is going to reduce by up to 45%, but cassava will only be reduced by 8%. Why are we trying to look for gold where there is no gold, and we are abandoning our diamonds just because of a narrative that we should not look at where we are? And I think yesterday, the distinguished professor said that we go to look for things in Sokoto when there is something in our Sokoto, right? We have something in our pocket and we go to look for it somewhere else. Why I'm bringing this up is that cassava is important, and therefore it's a high-value, climate-resilient crop. We must reimagine our food system to leverage what we have, not what we don't have. You can only get what you don't have by using what you have. But we focus on what we don't have. And therefore, it is important to make cassava not only an important crop for the continent, but one in which we should leverage to win off the importation of the 35 billion US dollars in importing unemployment and exporting employment, and invest that in research in cassava, in turning cassava to flour. And the good news is, cassava can produce up to 300 products, whether it is cassava bread, cassava cakes, cassava flour, and so on and so forth. And we can substitute wheat with cassava. And that takes me to a second point. We must reimagine our energy systems. We live in a continent today where we have 620 million citizens who are energy impoverished. I talked about 365 days of sunshine. I talked about a continent that actually is only harnessing 1% of that sunshine. Yet, we know that we can be able to do much better. But I want to bring up something here today that is not popular, but I'll bring it up because it's the right thing to do. I will be intellectually dishonest if I don't bring that up. And I brought this up 2 days ago, what I said was, you cannot ignore the reality of the continent and think you can solve the problems. The over 620 million African citizens who are energy impoverished live in rural areas. Grid electricity will not necessarily solve their problem because it will not even reach there. It's only mini-grid and off-grid that can be able to solve the problems of our mothers, our brothers and sisters in these rural areas. But even when you get electricity to them, they need to still buy the light bulbs. So if you don't help to ensure that electricity become what I call competitive energy to add value, to dry their vegetables, to dry their tomatoes, to use solar fridges, so they can be able to make money and replace those bulbs, how will they survive even with the electricity? This is just common sense. To address Africa's challenges doesn't need magic and juju, it needs logic. Africa's challenges need logic, reason and logic. And that takes me to the point which is not even talked about sometimes. So we think light, electricity, and then sometimes we forgot cooking. 700,000 Africans die each and every year. These are not statistics, these are people's mothers, brothers and sisters, fathers, who die because of indoor pollution. Why? Because they depend on charcoal. They've committed no crime. It's just because they don't have an alternative. So they depend on charcoal. Yet, we know that turning simple agricultural waste into fuel briquettes is 3 to 4 times more effective than charcoal, burns longer, and will save lives. But that's not our narrative. Our narrative is, I will not get a job now with the Sofa for Africa here. That must stop. That must stop. We have opportunities. The charcoal industry is worth $20 billion in the continent. Briquettes can create millions of jobs for young people, and they can tap into that 20 billion. That takes me to the third point. We must reimagine finance. We don't get money now. We don't get money. Now so did they talk. This continent, the informal sector engages over 80% of the continent. I grew up in a community like millions across in an informal sector, and I'm proud because I learned the best lessons of my life in that informal setting. My mother will contribute money with her friends, and they will buy books and uniform for us to go to school. They were using what is called njangi. They still do today. They were saving in little cooperatives, and they would share the money and use the money to provide the social amenities that were needed in the home at the time. Today, every community across Africa have a cooperative. Why are we not leveraging those cooperatives to supercharge and turbocharge them with the little resources that can come in so that our mothers and brothers can use that as the starting point to have access to resources? Social capital is important, and the trust that they've established in that community, if we only think big before we start thinking of reality, we might not get it right. The informal sector represents over 300 billion in lending gap that remains on tap. Yet we don't talk about it. And that takes me to the fourth point, which is diversification. We must diversify. If there is any lesson that we picked up from the past 2 years during COVID, it should be that while emergencies may be on a global scale, they do not affect everyone equally. That's a lesson that we learned. And yesterday, my very good friend, Dr. Boba, asked a question. He moderated a session here. He asked a question. What were the lessons that were learned, and what did we unlearn? And that panel discussion was very, very important. And I decided to frame this around this because the reality that the past 2 years taught us is that it is our responsibility to be prepared. It is our responsibility to be prepared. And I call diversification the biggest security of a system. If you cannot diversify, you cannot be resilient. Resilience is an attribute of diversification. And if we don't see diversification as our biggest strategy in anything, then we fail. And that's why this conference is very, very important. And the most important enabler of diversification is what I call skills retooling. Skills retooling are important. So we must learn new skills, regardless whether you study biochemistry, physics, like myself. It doesn't matter. Learn and venture to new aspects. Learn how to turn agricultural waste into fuel briquettes. This information is out there. It is out there. And we are doing this across the continent, leveraging on a tool that we developed called innovative volunteerism, just inspiring young people to voluntarily volunteer themselves to learn. And over 2,000 young people across the continent today have voluntarily volunteered themselves, and they are creating their enterprises, and they are tapping into this enormous space that no one is tapping into, turning environmental challenges into opportunities. We see them develop solar dryers. We see them develop agricultural waste into fuel briquettes, plastics into pavement ties, and etc. And that takes me to a point which I did mention 2 days ago, data. Success stories are the only thing that move people. Make man no lie you. If people don't see, they will not believe. Very few will believe. Ideas are important, but success stories are the only thing that move people. No matter how good or brilliant or excellent your idea and actions are, success stories do matter. And that is why you must always try to have a proof of concept. It works. It works. And therefore, verifiable proof of grand success stories that you gather the data and use the data with a proof of concept to showcase will sell and take you far. With all these aspects that I've mentioned, we need to look internally now. What then are the soft things we need to do? And the first one is we must cultivate purposeful passion. Passion is the new currency of now. I keep saying that give money to a passionless individual and watch that person squander that money. But give ideas to a passionate person, a purposeful, selfless individual, and see how he turns those ideas into money. We must therefore inspire one another to become passionate. It is that flame inside us that burns in whatever thing that we do, that we get up in the morning, because money will get finished, but your passion will never ever go anywhere, but it will bring you money. We must then become fearless. When I talk about fearlessness here, I keep telling young people they must become fearless but not careless. Be fearless but never be careless. What does it mean? Be fearless in looking for solutions, in seizing opportunities, what I call stubborn opportunism. But at the same time, be respectful, be humble, learn, be teachable. But don't think that because you are up there, you will carry your shoulders and then you will abuse people. You are breaking and burning your own bridges. Be fearless but never be careless. And the third one is master yourself. The first person to control is yourself. Learn. Be obedient. Regardless of what you go through, set goals and be focused and never stop making plans. Do not stop working hard. Fail, but learn from failure. If you don't start, you will not fail. If you don't fail, you will not learn. If you don't learn, you will not know. And if you don't know, then you get missing. You can never change. And the last part is to shun false narratives. I will take a minute here. We must shun false narratives. There is profound power in a narrative. There is profound power in a narrative because prevailing narratives are what shapes people's thinking. Prevailing narratives shape thinking. They shape strategies. And if we ignore it for just a minute, we will lose a lot of opportunities. Prevailing narrative shapes thinking. It shapes perspectives. And because of this, why I brought this up today is because if we ignore this, then we will be undermining a very important aspect sometimes to embrace things without questioning in a very thoughtful and critical way. Like an iconic genius Albert Einstein said, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. Across the continent today, Africans are presented sometimes as people who are too poor. We are not poor. We're just not adding value and understanding that we need to turn our challenges to opportunity and standing up to showcase that we can be responsible. Leadership is personal responsibility. And we must become leaders, selfless leaders. We must become values-based leaders. And each and every one of us, regardless of where we are, have to portray that so that we become the benchmark to inspire others. It therefore means if we do not shun this false narrative, when we hear narratives like Africa is too poor to develop, I say Africa is too rich to be poor. That should be the narrative as we get to action. None of us, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, is too small or big to contribute to the solutions process. Each and every one of us here today, regardless of which part of the world we are from, hold a piece of the solution to the challenges we face as a continent. We hold a piece, and the reality of now compels us to all become solution providers, because the prevailing emergencies over time present us with few alternatives. We must embrace bold collective actions like this conference has showcased, remembering the intrinsic truth of the African proverb that says there are only three friends on earth: courage, sense, and insight. Because in the mid-1940s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, as the clamor for self-determined role took center stage, a rich fever pitch, self-appointed men and women in the continent arose from nowhere and fought for self-determined rule. During that time, they espoused boldness. They did not stand and say, no, we don't get enough money. No, we cannot get up. I was born in a very poor home, so I cannot act. They didn't say that. They didn't postpone that for a day, hoping for elusive perfection. They did what was needed to be done at the time, and today, what we have seen in this conference here today is that solutions have been preferred. What we are seeing here is that it is our part, our turn to play our role, because every succeeding generation have always faced a challenge. But what people have done is that they roll off their sleeves to do what is needed to be done at the time. That is what our founding fathers did, and that is what we must do today. They did what was needed at the time. We must therefore engage with boldness, with the singularity of unity of purpose, knowing fully well that the ones who want to lift a rock start by lifting stones. We must start by lifting stones of successes and bringing them together so that at least tomorrow we can lift a mountain. This African proverb is your marching orders for you to become purposeful, passionate, responsible solution providers that Africa urgently needs today. If there is anything I've said which you will not want to remember, please remember these few words: that you are the best. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please one more time, can we put our hands together for Dr. Richard? That was quite an amazing presentation and quite a marathon as well. This is quite impressive. I would like to ask if anybody has questions or comments, we can take some few before we go up for our next item on the agenda. Any questions? Any comments? All right. So I'd like Dr. Richard to please come forth still so that he can respond to that as quickly as possible. Okay, the name, organization, and...
Thank you so much. My name is Dr. Oluwole Banjo from University of Lagos. I want to appreciate our last speaker. That is a revolution. Thank you so much. And this is what I've been asking everybody, everywhere I go. What are we doing in research in Nigeria and in Africa? I just Googled it out now, and I saw that Nigeria is the highest producer of cassava in the world. What are we doing with it? What are we doing? He has just told us 300 products from cassava. And I begin to wonder, why is Central Bank not doing a special target on cassava rather than rice? Cassava, where we have comparative advantage. Every world takes its comparative advantage. Why is, I wish somebody from CBN or from Federal Ministry of any of the agencies concerned is here to tell us something about it. Cassava, solar energy. Why are we not doing something about it in Africa? Most of our research is always focused, well, maybe because they are the financier, the outside world. I think it is time we start doing research based on our indigenous Nigeria, indigenous Africa. Find out our problem and how to provide local solution to them. It is very important. I want to see a Nigeria where if there is a problem, the whole world will be begging because we cannot give them cassava. Rather than when Ukraine is having problem, like Ukraine is having problem now, the whole world is in problem because of cereal. The whole world should be begging because both food and industrial materials, everything can come out from cassava. So please, this body, there's a body of knowledge here. I'm appealing, like he has said, let us look inward in our research work.
All right.
It is very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, can you put your hands together for him? Any other comments or questions? I'm going to let Dr. Munang react or respond to that comment.
Yeah, thank you very much, Doc, for that. I think that was a comment, right? So I don't really have to respond. But what I need to say is one thing, which is we need to appreciate progress. I think, Mr. Moderator, I can stand and answer it here, right? Because
yes,
it's a conversation.
Yeah, you can.
Let's make it informal rather than formal. If we do not appreciate progress, we can never make progress. And I think when you look at the continent, you brought a very important point. When you look at the continent, I think we do not appreciate the progress we have made. Is it enough? No, if it was enough, then why are we here? Generally, the way life is set up is that you can do as much, but there will always be challenges. You think you've reached the top of the mountain, but we are not moving at the pace in which we are supposed to move because the many challenges we have are disguised opportunities. Why I said that is because I want to learn Nigeria is the first country in the entire world that came up with a cassava bread policy. In the entire world. I'm not talking in Africa, in the entire world. And what did that policy? It put in place that every bread produced must have 20% of cassava in it. The question is, how can we leverage on that and take it forward as other African countries benchmark and learn on that? That's progress. Because if you do not acknowledge what is there, it means you don't believe that anything can be done, and that is where the false narrative that I mentioned start to come in. Oh, they cannot do it. No, Africans cannot do it. No, I don't think we need knowledge from everywhere in the world, but it must benchmark on what we have. And that's something that I strongly believe in, and I will articulate it in every policy space that I have the opportunity to do. Then the indigenous knowledge, thank you very much. We have droughts across Africa. For those of you who have gone to Australia, I mean, it's a drought-prone country, but do they suffer from food insecurity and all that? Why don't we ask ourselves, why don't they suffer from that? Because they tap into what they have to use the systems they have. Africa, we have the Zai indigenous technique in the Sahel, in Burkina Faso, that has proven to help crop produce over 500%. But you go to public spaces where there is serious policy discussion, you never hear about this. You hear about stories that sometimes don't add up. So what am I trying to say? It is us to take the responsibility to use the spaces we have to be bold enough to speak what is needed to touch lives. Not talking politics, but talking solutions that can touch the lives of our mothers. Because I think we get easily engulfed in talking about sound bites rather than talking about what can touch the life of a mother, of a brother and a sister in a community. So thank you very much. Please, if you have questions, let's, because we have to round this up. I think the moderator is so excited that I didn't use all the 1 hour.
Oh, no, well, it's interesting. I mean, Dr. Munang, you're one of the people who I've met here that I've gained so much from. Your passion is very infectious, not infectious disease. You know, it's something that helps us to think, and that is very important. And then the point of all of this is obviously, I mean, if we were in a university setting, these are courses that would have gone back with credits to our grades, you know, so we don't take any of this for granted. Ladies and gentlemen, any other comments or any other questions? We have a little time for that. All right, if there is none, Dr. Mulang, with your kind permission, I'm going to close this section. Please, can we put our hands one more time for him? Well, sometimes I really wonder what actually happens to the cassava bread or the cassava bread. I mean, is it, as the case might be. But Nigerians themselves have to wake up to that reality. Like you've rightly said, if the war in Ukraine is putting the whole world, in a really bad situation in terms of grains or cereals, you can imagine if we have not just a comparative advantage, but the leadership role in that regard. A lot of what we'll be talking about, perhaps we won't be talking about it today. As like you rightly said, Africa is not poor. We're not poor. It's just some of the narratives that has been used to define who we are. If Africa was poor, I imagine this kind of international conference, we won't have over 20 countries represented, both in Africa and outside Africa. There are a lot of opportunities here, and you can imagine the fact that our chief host is still sitting to this point for the 3 days. Please put your hands together for him. This is amazing. Not to sound as if I'm patronizing him, but I'll be honest, this is the first time I've seen a government official, not just a government official at a mid-level, he is in the cabinet, that has sat through the 3 whole days for the conference. And he was here yesterday night, for the award. It's amazing. It's amazing. I don't know if he has any biological, medical sources that he uses to have enough energy to sit in for 3 days and all of that, so I might have to consult him in that regard. So that by the time I get to his age and level, I'll be looking as good as he is looking, and of course with all the strength to sit for 3 good days. It's amazing. Please, one more time, can we put our hands together for him? And particularly, I would like to recognize the man who gave me the shoes to wear for the moment, as the case might be, and his commendation has been huge. I understand it was a presidential candidate as well, and that is Dr. Adesina Fagbinro Byron. Please, can you put your hands together for him? I can't see him anywhere, but I would like us to make sure that he knows I've given him this due acknowledgement. These are men that have been very fortunate to be associated with as a result of the African Conference on